The gospel for today is from John chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. It can be found on page 104 in the New Testament section of your pew Bibles. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister of Martha. Let me start that over. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Martha was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sister sent a message to Jesus, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you. And are you going there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble, because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble, because the light is not in them. After saying this, he told them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right. Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came also with her weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, where have you laid him? And he said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he had been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upwards and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you were always near me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. May God guide our understanding of these scriptures. Amen. O Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Now, I could tell you today about the dual meanings that John had in this passage, about the light of day and the light of God and stumbling in the darkness. I could tell you about the disciples' misunderstanding that Lazarus had fallen asleep, when in actuality he had been dead. The audience who listened to John's gospel knew this. I could tell you why Jesus said to them, "I'm glad I wasn't there. I'm glad I wasn't there. And that you didn't believe because I was there." Next week is Palm Sunday. Next week. I could tell you about this gospel reading as a sign story, which has two elements where Jesus kind of acts on his own. He doesn't respond when they ask him to come. He says it's not fatal. He waits 2 days. And he acts to reveal God's glory. I could tell you about how Easter Sunday is 2 weeks away. And the coincidence of how Bethany is 2 miles from Jerusalem. I could tell you about the comparisons and the parallels between Lazarus and Jesus. Lazarus in a tomb, a cave, with a stone that closes it off. How the stone is removed. The dead man comes forth. And his wounds, his body is unbound. I could remind you about the blind man that Jesus healed last week, that Carissa talked about so beautifully, and the blind faith that it took for him to be healed. But I'm not going to tell you all that. Actually, I already did, didn't I? What hit me as I was coming in today is that, yes, there are parallels between Lazarus and Jesus. Tremendous parallels. Look for them yourselves. Listen over the next couple of weeks. And I could tell you that Lazarus had to rise, and he would die again. And he rose, and the price that was paid was Jesus' death. But what hit me as I was waking this morning, was the words, "if only." Because this is such a personal story. It's not a cleverly written story. It's not worrying about whether John the Gospel writers used double entendres. It's not relevant, or it is relevant, but it's not about whether Lazarus' rising from the dead foreshadows Jesus's. It's not about that. It's about those words, "if only." If only you had been here, my brother would not have died. If only I had said the right words, a person might have not killed themselves. If only I was a better parent, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, grandparent, my family member wouldn't use drugs. If only God listened to my prayers, everything would be all right, and miracles would happen. If only I had chosen a different career. If only I hadn't married that person. If only I hadn't acted thusly. This is a miracle story about the raising of Lazarus. But when you read it to the psalm, "Out of the depths I cry to you, O God," you understand that this story is about our expectations, our hopes, our dreams, our prayers. And when they don't get answered in the way we want them to. It's about our regrets for what we did or what we didn't do that might have made a difference. It's about all the guilt that we take on as individuals, that we carry, that burdens us, that deadens us, that needs to be unburdened. It's about those would've, should'ves, and could'ves that didn't happen. Is there anyone here who doesn't have a regret about something in their life? Maybe some of you. You need to take those regrets and realize, as you bring them to the communion table today, that Jesus can heal them, that you are forgiven. I've been watching that Bible series they had on PBS, and it amazes me as I look how violent it is. How violent it is. Now, I haven't gotten out to the New Testament yet, I must admit. But that's going to get pretty violent, too, when we do that over the next couple of weeks. We could not get it together in all those years. We couldn't get it together as a society. And Jesus was raised from the dead because we couldn't do it for each one of us. So when you come forward to communion table, and as the week goes on, you will remember the phrase, If only. If only. And as those thoughts and those feelings rush over you, give them to God. If only I hadn't. If only I did. If only you were there, my brother would have lived. Jesus weeps. Is Jesus weeping just for Lazarus? Or is Jesus weeping for each one of us? Is Jesus weeping for each one of us who feels burdened and held down by those things that are individual to each one, but common in humanity? Jesus is weeping for those who are in grief, for his friend and loved one Lazarus, but he's also weeping for each one of us. And in doing that weeping, he also sacrifices himself for each one of us. That was the price paid for bringing Lazarus forth. Throughout this entire passage, you will see the glory of God spoken about. I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even if they are dead, will live. And whosoever lives and believes in me will never die. We're having communion today. Bring your burdens. Lay them down. And as you receive the communion, at the end of each time, the bread of life, or however it's said, say Amen. The cup of salvation, Amen. Do you know what Amen means? I use it here, and you may not know it. It means, may it be so. Put your hope in God. Put your hope in God's healings. Put your hope that coming to this table, receiving this communion, reconciles you with God and frees you from regret. And every time those regrets come up, turn them over to God. May it be so. Let us share the peace of God with one another. The peace of God be with you.